Welcome to GRE Snacks, snackable episodes about the GRE, GMAT, and graduate school admissions. I'm Tyler, founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable GRE course that includes everything you need to ace your GRE. A full textbook, videos on key topics, tons of GRE questions backed by our memory enhancing algorithm, a built-in study planner and essay grader, and full-length practice exams. You can try it out for free by going to achievable.me, and if you like it, use the code podcast to save 10%. Now, let's get started. Today, we've got Eva Meza with us. And Eva, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and what you're doing.
My name is Eva Meza. I'm a fifth year PhD candidate. I study social psychology at the University of California, Davis. My research focuses on close relationships with an emphasis on jealousy, infidelity, cultural, and gendered factors that shape how people understand and navigate romantic experiences.
Great. Yeah, so then let's talk about your life as a psychology PhD, right? And I mean, I think, first of all, maybe it would be good to understand essentially like what is a psychology PhD? Because a lot of the things that you just mentioned, I feel like are things that are almost things that you'd expect like a therapist or social worker to be interested in. So how does a psychologist and a psychology PhD like differ from that?
Yes, so psychology is a very broad field. Within psychology, when you think of it, you usually think of like maybe clinical counseling. And yeah, that is a very real field you can go into. And you do a lot of one on one practical type of applied work with others. Versus what I do is I do research. And this constitutes like as part of a PhD, you have to do a program of research. And there's many different fields in psychology, including like perceptual psychology, inequality psychology. My focus is on romantic relationship psychology. And so I'm really interested in studying how people are in romantic relationships, what factors affect romantic relationships over time, really topics like that.
Great. Yeah, and I mean, maybe that's like the next question is kind of talking about your journey, right? Like what led you to pursue this degree and kind of like why were you interested in this?
Yeah, so there were really three main reasons why I decided to do a PhD. The first reason is I have very supportive parents that always valued education, and that is something that I'm really grateful for. So they always supported me in my educational journey. I think they were surprised that I wanted to do a PhD when I mentioned it. They thought I might do a master's, but I think overall they were very supportive of me continuing my higher education. The second thing is after I graduated undergrad, I did a 9 to 5 job. I worked at Intel. I was an administrative assistant, and I realized that I wasn't really a huge fan of doing this like typical 9 to 5. I felt like I needed something more stimulating, and I really liked to learn, and I found myself really missing school. So during my gap year, I decided to apply to PhD programs. And then the third reason is I was part of a research lab in my undergraduate, and I realized like I really liked research and I really liked the process of it. And just having that experience solidified my interest to pursuing a PhD. And I did a research internship as part of my like summer as well. So that also just really solidified my passion for doing research and continuing this PhD.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, if you're kind of giving advice to other people that might be considering going down this path, right? I mean, what advice would you have? I mean, the biggest thing is like PhDs are obviously a lot of school, and it's a lot of also probably, not really making a ton of money, though I know that like I haven't done a PhD myself, but I'm pretty sure that like PhDs do pay you to an extent, so you're not just like completely losing money, but um, how do you decide to do this versus like going into the working world or something else?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a really great question. I would say my advice is make sure the job you want requires a PhD. And so a lot of people that go into a PhD, it's because they want to become a college professor at maybe like an R1 institution like UC Davis or UC Riverside. So a place that really does research and they also want to teach. So that's really the main reason why people want to do this type of work is because they just want to do research. They want to come up with a research question and research that. So I would say make sure that your goal requires a PhD. Otherwise, you might find yourself wanting to maybe master out and leave the program early if there's something else you really want to do. But yeah, there's definitely some real costs to doing a PhD, and that might mean not having enough money to put in your savings, right? Or not starting a retirement fund and waiting until after your PhD to really do those things.
Yeah. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, I guess then, like, let's talk about the employment part of it too, because I mentioned that just now, like, that you are going to have a job while you do this, or at least that's like, I think it's the vast majority of PhDs. So, how does that look, right? Like, what does funding typically look like? What, like, how do you balance kind of the job with your school and everything else that you're doing? And yeah, just tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so there's different types of funding, and this is specifically for psychology, but it can also be for like neuroscience and other fields as well. So one is you could be a GSR, which stands for a graduate student researcher. And so basically you can apply for maybe different grants or awards that will give you money to pursue a certain research project. You can also get a fellowship, and coming into my first year of my PhD, I was given the Distinguished Scholar Fellowship, and that just paid for my whole year. I didn't have to turn in a project or show something for that. It just happened coming into the program, and that was really nice. I didn't have to TA, which means being a teaching assistant. But usually, you do have to be a teaching assistant in exchange for your tuition. So sometimes people don't know that PhDs are fully funded for the most part. This excludes maybe some EDD programs, but for the most part, you have to teach classes like discussion courses or grade papers for undergraduates in exchange for basically your tuition and be able to do the research you want to do. But yeah, those are
Mhm.
different types of funding. You can also get a part-time job, which is what I have. And in my contract, I can't work more than 10 hours. So there is a cap
Mhm.
on it. So I work less than 10 hours a week on this part-time job. And I just help graduate students with their resumes and CVs. So your campus will probably have a lot of different options you can do as a graduate student as well.
Yeah, and I mean, is it feasible to kind of make ends meet while you're doing this?
Yeah, I would say it can be. During the summers are where it's a little bit tricky. My program guarantees funding for part of the summer, but there is
Mhm.
like maybe a month and a half where I have to really save money. And it also depends on your funding. We recently had our funding increased, so I just save money all year round, and it's definitely okay during the summer. But some people do get like full-time jobs over the summer when they're not working. It's just tricky because it's only like maybe a 6-week window. But yeah.
Yeah, well, great. Yeah, and then let's talk just kind of like, I mean, you've mentioned it a little bit, but I want to kind of dig into like the day to day of being a PhD student, right? So how is your workload? Like, how are you kind of juggling all these different things, right? If both you and if you have like also examples of peers too, that's great.
Yes. So, yeah, it really depends. And I would say it depends most by year. So, in my first year, I had a lot of classes I had to attend, and it was like a statistics course and maybe a content course. And I had mandatory meetings with my advisor. So, my day really consisted of going to class, studying with friends, maybe having my meetings, my mandatory meetings, and going to sleep. So, I was grinding a lot during that time. Then during my second year, I had to take a written exam. And so my whole summer consisted of just studying for that exam. I had to read 100 articles during the summer and take a 3-day exam on it. So I just read through every single article every day for that summer. And I took the exam. And then after that, you have your qualifying exam. And that's just showing what you've done so far. And the qualifying exam really varies depending on your advisor, depending on your program, your department. But after the qualifying exam, things become a lot more flexible. You still have to put in the same amount of hours, but just in different ways. And so now I'm working on my dissertation, and that just really looks like me writing whenever I have a chance, just doing analysis, getting writing done, maybe having a meeting with my advisor, and then also
Mhm.
doing a part-time job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, how do you balance all of that? I guess like, and how do you keep it all straight?
Yeah, so Google Calendar is my friend. I do a lot of work on Google Calendar, and I put anything I have scheduled, I always put on my Google Calendar. I even schedule my naps, so it can get a little bit crazy, but I try to take time. I try to work within a 9 to 5 window and really be strict about that. Some days I have deadlines and I am working until maybe 11, maybe 12, maybe 1. I do work on weekends as well. I try to have a work-life balance. I also take breaks. If I go on vacation, I don't look at my email, I don't look at my phone. So just having something to look forward to can be really helpful during those times where you really have to work outside of those 9 to 5 hours.
Hmm. Yeah, well, and I mean, I've never scheduled naps, but certainly I've had to. get a lot of work done. So I understand a little bit. Um, but I just think that, yeah, I think the hardest part would probably be just all the different commitments you've got, right? So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I want to talk now, just shifting to kind of how you get support with those challenges. I mean, I think that there's just a lot of different potential types of support. It could be, people that are just like peers, it could be mentors, it could be faculty. What are the things that you've experienced with your program, and kind of what are the pieces of the graduate school experience that you can get support with?
Yeah, so I would say this also really depends on the year of your PhD and your first year. You're taking required courses. So it's really easy to make friends, create study groups, and I'm trying to hold on to those study groups and those friends really helps. And now having peers that are in the same year as me that are going through the same things and the same experiencing the same challenges is incredibly helpful. But also I would say my main support group were older grad students that already went through that and they became like they were my mentors and they became my really good friends and just knowing what to expect and having transparency about the process was incredibly helpful and I appreciate my older grad student friends but as well as your advisors not only supposed to be an advisor but also a mentor. If you're lucky, they're a really good mentor and they help you keep on track with your deadlines and timelines and things like that. Besides that, we have like our graduate coordinator, and every program should have a graduate coordinator, and they help you in case you have any issues, in case you maybe want to switch advisors, in case you have problems with people in your lab. Like your graduate coordinator really does a lot to make sure you're on the right track and they reach out to you and in on you. So I would say take advantage of the support system the school gives you and my school has like mental health resources as well if you need a counselor to talk to. It's like free resources. So I always encourage students to take advantage of those things and just finding other faculty that maybe do similar work as you that maybe you could collaborate on a project with them. They also sometimes become really great mentors.
Great. Yeah, and then I mean, I guess wanted to throw in kind of a question here about just kind of the whole, looking at the whole, you said you're in year five, right? You're
Yes.
starting in year one and you're going kind of like through the 5 years, and kind of all the while you've got all these things going on. 5 years is a long time to do anything really, but you've got like this, for lack of a better word, like mega project as it's going on. You've got to do your dissertation. Walk us through that part of it, right? Like essentially, what in year one, year two, you're doing this, like year three, year four, year five, you're doing these things, and just kind of how you keep the site that long-term 5 year long thing that you got to do while all, or, does it not come up until later?
Yeah, yeah. So, like you said, thinking about your one, there are a lot of things to like keep in mind. One of which is, for example, like your research program shifts. Most students I've talked to, they're doing very, very different projects than they did in their first year, research wise. And sometimes, like your advisor shifts, sometimes your like support system shifts. So, it's important to keep that in mind and also trying to be okay with uncertainty. I think a lot of times, like maybe you feel like you don't know what you're doing. You obviously, when you're working on a project, you don't know how the results will come out. And there is this pressure to like publish and get projects done. Really just thinking about your PhD as like a marathon versus a sprint. I would always compare like maybe a master's is more of a sprint because you have a lot to do in 2 years and then you have your master's thesis versus a PhD really is a marathon. Like you have sometimes you have days that are really productive and great, and sometimes you have days that are not as productive, and that's okay. And just really giving yourself a lot of empathy and a break to recognize that. There's going to be really great days and just some days that you need a rest. That's totally fine too.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I appreciate that advice. I think that's good advice. And, thinking back to kind of year one, right? Like, what is the advice that you would give somebody from going kind of from maybe grad school, or maybe they went and did the working world thing for a little while, but like that, transition into doctoral study, right? Like, for you could keep it to psychology or just to anybody, like how you make that transition at the beginning.
Yeah, so I think for advice, I would say the advice that I received that I took to heart was making sure you make friends in your first year and doing your best to maintain that in your fifth year. And your fifth year and your later years, it can be very isolating because you're not taking classes, you're not required to go to these mandatory meetings anymore. It's really just on you. So making sure that you maintain your friendships that you made in your first couple years over time can be just really helpful and prevent loneliness and isolation. And like I said, like being okay with uncertainty, especially if maybe there's some type of shift or change in your research program, that's totally okay and totally normal. Just giving yourself compassion and also trying your best to maintain those friendships that you make.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. And then now let's talk about, basically, I know that your program doesn't have rotations, but let's just talk about kind of like working with your advisor, what would normally be like kind of a rotation experience, but just basically just like doing the work, right? Working in the lab or other things like that. Would love for you to just kind of walk us through that experience.
Yeah, so when I was in undergrad, I was working in a neuroscience lab, and what I noticed is the graduate students did do like this typical rotation where they have maybe switch advisors every couple weeks or maybe months, and they get to taste every single lab and then choose a lab that chooses you as well, that they are the best fit in. What my program does is different. We're in psychology, so typically in psychology, you find an advisor early on, even before you apply to the program. You maybe email some advisors, potential advisors, and you say, I'm interested in your research. Are you looking for graduate students? And
Mhm.
ideally, they say, yes, I'm looking for graduate students. Maybe you set up a meeting or maybe you just apply and you make sure you put them in your application. And then they interview you and they choose you from the beginning. And so, working in the lab, you already know who you're going in with, and knowing the peers that are already working in the lab and getting advice from them is important, and hearing what they think about the advisor and how the advisor works, and also asking the advisor what their mentorship style is. Is it hands on? Is it hands off? Those can be really important questions to ask as well.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I mean, essentially, I wanted to ask then about like what the outcome of this work that you did was. Like, did it help kind of shape what you were doing? Like, I wonder how many people go into their PhD program with a very firm idea of what they want to study versus they kind of let like their research work shape their path a little bit.
Definitely. Yeah, I would say it's a hands-on learning experience. And people often compare doing a PhD to like building a house, except you don't have any materials. You have to gather all the materials. You have to be the architect and make the plan. You have to be the civil engineer and code it. And then you have to actually construct it and decorate it and furnish it, right? So it's like that, where to some degree you do feel like you are the director of this construction. But the good thing is, your advisor is mainly there to help you construct this type of house. So it does feel like that. And yeah, oftentimes it can be very challenging. I think it's also very rewarding. And so when you mentioned like maybe a misconception that PhD students have, it could be that you feel like it's very overwhelming, but you do get the support and the help you need along the way to make that happen.
Mhm. Great. Yeah, and then I want to just kind of conclude here by asking if there's anything that specific to psychology PhD programs that you feel like maybe are misconceptions or things that people should consider before they want to go down this path, right? Like, what are just some, now that you've done it, like, what are some things that you've learned that were different than what you expected?
Yes. So when I started the PhD, a lot of people told me that, maybe even previous grad students told me they felt like dropping out midway, and that everybody goes through that. Everybody feels like they want to drop out midway or at some point in the PhD. I would say for me personally, that's a misconception. At no point did I ever feel like I can't do this or like I want to drop out. I think as long as you have a positive rapport with your advisor, really makes or breaks your experience as a PhD student in some cases. But as long as you have overall positive rapport with your advisor and you're making progress along the way, I think that there really isn't any real reason to feel like that unless you have some type of family emergency or other like extenuating circumstance. But yeah, I think you can do it if that's something that is a goal of yours and you feel like you have the proper support and motivation to do it. It's definitely something you can do. It's not scary.
Yeah, fantastic. And then anything that we didn't cover today that you wanted to throw in there before we wrap up?
I think it's important for students to really feel prepared about doing a PhD and finding the proper resources and support. So, yeah, that's something that I'm really passionate about as well. So, they can always contact me if they have any questions or want that support.
Great. Yeah, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So, I have my Instagram that I to give out to people that do need that support. It's at the Latinx Success Network. And sometimes I post resources, workshops on applying to grad school and things like that.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been
Thank
GRE
you.
Snacks, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Eva Meza and the Latin X Success Network on Instagram. And Achievable has a great online GRE course that you can try for free at achievable.me.